of the contents. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Am I audible? Right. Well,
Yes,
there was some
sir.
interjection, that's why. Okay, can I continue?
Sure.
Yeah. So, coming back to surgical consents. So, this is a commonplace, this is the idea that we always have in mind, that the ideal consent is informed consent. The law mandates that we should be taking informed consent. There is no compromise on that. And we also know that informed consent, the scope is so wide, so ambiguous, that rarely you find that there are templates of forms given for the informed consent, which really, when you go through them, give all that information which you imagine an ideal informed consent should have. So we live in continuous guilt that we don't take proper informed consent. First place, we don't understand the scope, and secondly, we find it too impractical. But we don't concede to each other. We always brag that we are taking informed consent from our patients. Now let us see what the law says. Law really mandates informed consent, or it is something, it is just a fashion to say, use this term informed consent. What is the law, precise law behind it? Now, what is consent? Consent is agreement of two minds on the same terms, same manner, and on the same understanding. Consensus ad idem, it is covered by the Indian Contract Law section 13. Now, this surgical consent, the history, the origin dates back to 1947, when after the Second World War, in which Nazis, they conducted inhuman experiments on live human, on living humans. They came this Nuremberg Code, which was accepted internationally, that no human being can subject it to any surgical intervention or otherwise without his consent. This right of self-determination came into being into this. And in 1948, it was enshrined in the Article 7 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And after that, it became well-entrenched principle. In 1964, World Medical Association included in its Declaration of Helsinki. In our Constitution, it finds place in Article 21 of Indian Constitution. When it was originally created in 1947, it was not there so explicitly, but later on, when it was, this section was reinterpreted in various judgments, especially in judgment Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, it was given a much wider import, much wider meaning, which also included the right to self-determination, which implication indirectly means the consent to bodily interventions. Now, the law of surgical consent in India. Hello. Hello. Is there any problem?
Yes,
hello.
You go ahead, sir.
Hello. Hello.
No problem, sir. No problem. You are audible.
Oh, you are around. You are so. Yeah, I was a little despondent that you are coming at 8:20. Thank you very much for coming. Now,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now we are coming to the first important slide. That is the law of surgical consent in India. It takes on the subject head on very directly. That what is the law of surgical consent in India? We are bound by the law. Under Article 19, we have got full freedom to do our profession within the scope of the law. We can be, our freedom can be constrained only by application of law or nothing else, not by whims and fancies of anybody giving lecture that what is informed consent and that becomes binding on us. That is wrong interpretation of our fundamental liberties. So now it is enshrined in two laws. One is that directly refers to your professional code conduct and etiquettes, MCA guidelines in its regulation number 17, class 16. And secondly, Supreme Court judgments. Now in India, very important source of law is Supreme Court judgments. It follows from Article 141 of the Constitution. In fact, it is a constitutional, fact that the case laws which are adjudged by Supreme Court and certain declarations are made regarding or interpretations are made regarding certain laws or certain situations, public situations, whatever is given in those laws, that is as sacrosanct as any legislated law, unless it is overruled or replaced or set aside by any other legislation in future. Of course, legislation is supreme. Supreme Court cannot manufacture law, cannot legislate law. But yes, by way of declarations, interpretations, whenever there is void, it can introduce its interpretations, and that becomes a law, is a binding, and it is a constitutional binding. Now, first I will come to Medical Council of India in Chapter 7 and Indian Medical Council Regulations, Ethics, Etiquettes and Conduct 2002 and Regulation 7, Clause 16 writes. Now it writes about informed consent or consent, I would say. Now, what does it write? It is an important law applicable on us. Before performing an operation, the physician should obtain in writing the consent from the husband or wife, parent or guardian in the case of minor. So it talks about minor before first comma. And then, or the patient himself, as the case may be. That is, if adult, then patient, if minor, then the guardians. Then it goes on to say, in any operation which may result in sterility, the consent of both husband and wife is needed. Please note, the word informed or any other qualification of the word consent is missing. And that the absence of any such word is important. That means that law as such deals directly with the subject of our professional conduct. Do not recognize any other thing rather than bare word consent, and does not impose upon us the word informed. But it is a small part of the whole game. As I told you, these judgments are very important. These judgments are very progressive, very dynamic. From one judgment to another, the law changes altogether. So this was the first game changer. This is not Indian judgment. This was in UK, and for reasons, as you know, India has been a colonial rule. The law follows a British rule till date very closely. So when this judgment came, there's a Bolam versus Freer Management Committee. The story is very interesting. This is the judicial fundamental, judicial concept of the consent was laid down first of all in this particular judgment. The story is like this, that this Mr. Bolam, he was having psychiatric order and he agreed to undergo electroconvulsive therapy. Now, what happens next? That he is told about that in a general way about what procedure he will be undergoing, and he may suffer some kind of injury also. And when the procedure was done, he was not given any muscle relaxant. Then what happened? There he flailed, convulsed, and he was not restrained perhaps adequately, and he failed violently before the procedure was stopped, and in course of that he suffered several fractures. Now after that, he sued the committee, hospital committee, for compensation for more than one reason. One, for not giving a relaxant and not even being told that this facility was available. Had he been given a relaxant, he may not have convulsed so violently and broken his bones. And then also not telling him about this complication in full detail. In manner it should have been told to us in the seriousness, with the seriousness it has occurred. He had never had the idea. So he must be compensated. Now guess what would have been this is a famous judgment. Few of you may also be knowing the outcome of that, but still, with a neutral mind, if you think he was right in asking for, this is the minimum information they should have given. After what they are going to, he has suffered so much. But then the court said that whatever hospital management committee has done is an accepted procedure, an accepted concept of treatment, and they have not done anything out of the way with you. They have been doing with other patients also. Yes, in your case, the fractures have been more admitted. It is unfortunate, but it is not negligence. Thereby, so the result was that the committee was not negligent. The principle ensconced in this judgment is known as Bolam principle, and it is still a vibrant principle till date, although it is it is blamed for not being totally shorn of the paternalism, the professional paternalism, and compromising the autonomy, but still in Commonwealth countries it still holds valid. Now in India, what holds valid, I will come to that later. Now this was one side of the story. Now let us look at the other side of the story. Now what happens 15 years later? This is happening now in America. Canterbury versus Spence. Let us look at this story also. Now, this fellow who was having back pain, he agreed to undergo spinal surgery for the back pain. Myelogram was done. There was compression was seen. Some defect was seen. Surgery was indicated. And after surgery, unfortunately, he was not informed at that time that can be any complication like paralysis. But then he developed paralysis. And when he developed paralysis, he sued the hospital. Now, the hospital, the surgeon, he took the defense that I have done in best faith. It was a conscionable decision to operate on. The chances of this kind of complication is merely 1%, and we have the therapeutic privilege of not telling these complications which occur so uncommonly. They will be deterred. They will not take the proper treatment. It was infinitesimally small risk, and there was no need to tell it. Whatever I have done, I have done for the benefit of the patient only. Now guess again, circumstances look similar. But what was the judgment? The judgment was, yes, he sued, and now the judgment was that no, there was negligence. Even if the chances were less than 1%, but it was material complication. It should have been told. And who told you that the patient would not be acquainted with complication, which is rare? He must be told about all possible complications. The patient is most important and is entitled to know everything before he undergoes surgery. So there is American doctrine, therefore it means that the doctor should give such information as a reasonable patient would like to know. This was the Canterbury principle, and this is the concept of informed consent. And the English doctrine, which was in the first instance, it means the voluntary consent on basis of information given by a reasonable doctor. Here it is the emphasis on reasonable doctor, and in the first instance it is the reasonable patient or a prudent patient who would like to make a decision independently. And here the emphasis on reasonable doctor, who thinks that what is the most beneficial for the patient, and he gives the information that is adequate for the patient to make a reasonable decision. So it is known as real consent. This is also known as Canterbury principle. This is known as Bolam principle. If we look at bioethics, beneficence, that is doing good, monophysician not doing any harm, autonomy is the self-determination of the patient, and justice is distributive justice. It links up with triage. This is not in part of discussion today, but benefits is the overarching principle in Bolam principle, whereas autonomy, that is the patient's right to know everything, is the principle in Canterbury. Otherwise, both are compliant with the bioethical principles. Both are compliant, fully compliant, but the emphasis is different. Benefits in Bolam, autonomy in Canterbury. Now, informed consent, by definition, what is the detail? The consent that is given by a person after receipt of the following information: nature and purpose of the proposed procedure, what the procedure is, what is the expected outcome and the likelihood of success, and what are the risks inherent, and the alternatives to the procedure and supporting information regarding those alternatives. That is important. And the effect of no treatment. If treatment was again, what will happen? Effect of no treatment procedure, including the effect on the prognosis and the material risks associated with no treatment. And sixth, which is less commonly known, also included are the instructions concerning what should be done if the procedure turns out to be harmful or unsuccessful. That is, may get infected, what you will do. Even the scope extends to that kind of information. Now, this is a very tedious kind of giving all that information, ensuring, documenting it, keeping it in record. It will spend and answering all the questions of that may arise from this. It can take a very long time, and then since questions need to be answered by the surgeon, that also means that the consent has to be taken by the specialist personally. Now, this judgment, which came in 2008, that decided finally, with finality, which law, which principle will hold sway in Indian scenario, that is in our hospitals. So in Samira Kohli versus Prabha Manchanda in 2008, the court says, we have, however, consciously preferred the real consent. This is Bolam principle. evolved in Bolam and Sidaway. Sidaway judgment came 1985 and ratified the Bolam. In preference to the reasonably prudent patient test in Canterbury, the reason is that having regard to the ground realities in medical and healthcare in India, we have problem of turnover. And this Canterbury is demanding is more rigorous kind of consent, and most of the patients do not cannot avail of their this right of self-determination so effectively and may get confused on the contrary. So best in our would be same as in Britain and other Commonwealth countries, Hong Kong, etc. That is real consent and not the informed consent. They went on that the nature and extent of information to be furnished by the doctor to the patient to secure the consent need not be of the stringent and high degree mentioned in Canterbury, that is informed consent, but should be of the extent which is accepted as normal and proper by a body of medical men skilled and experienced in the particular field. This criteria that whatever is done by the doctor in Bolam principle, whatever information is given by doctor, whichever surgery is chosen by the doctor, it is normal and proper according to body of medical men skilled and experienced particularly is the central theme. That is, whatever you are doing or whatever type of counseling you are giving, if it is acceptable to a reasonable professional body of which you are a member or you are not a member, but you can cite that, then as long as that criteria is fulfilled, there is no negligence. The consent is not invalid or consent is not illegal. It will depend upon the physical and mental condition of the patient, the nature of the treatment, and the risk and consequences attached to the treatment. So it also means that if the mental condition or physical condition is such that he is not able to give consent, even then it is bounden duty of the professional to go by what is acceptable by the professional body, take consent from the fellow professionals and go ahead and not withhold treatment. The nature of the treatment, the risk and consequence, that means that that means that if say it is a small operation, you can modify your modify your consent. You can make it small because the risk involved are small, the procedure is small. If Sejan Dermite says there is no need to take such elaborate informed consent, such long consent. Now, what are the elements of real consent according? The patient gives it voluntarily without any coercion, without any misrepresentation, without any apprehension, and without any force. The patient has the capacity and competence to give consent. That is that he has attained majority, he is not lunatic, and that kind of mental competence. The patient, third, the patient has adequate level of information about the nature of the procedure to which he is consented. Now, this adequate level of information is to be decided by the professional body, and the doctor who is giving this adequate must conform to that. If he is conforming to that, then it is a real consent, and is a valid legal consent even in India. And since the emphasis on just level of information, it may be given through brochure, it may be given through Google, it may be given through other source, it may be given through the some other healthcare worker who is well conversant with it and can answer elementary question of the patient. Then it is not always necessary that the surgeon himself should sit there unless patient specifically demands it and take the consent himself. Meaning thereby, printing paper is all right, dotted line is all right, but whatever written in the printing paper, that must be explained in vernacular to it to be the true legal consent, because it is the meeting of the minds, and the meeting of the minds can be true only if there is equal comprehension by the person who is receiving, who has to give the consent. So those criteria must be fulfilled, but adequate level of information which is generally accepted by the professionals, if that has been given, that should be adequate. That there can be any measure for it. Suppose I am asked to show, I may show Love and Valley, I may show some any other textbook, that these are the completion given. I have told him all, so that will absolve me. He cannot complain. And the procedure which I have done, the laparoscopic hernia repair may be a preferable one, looking at the total. But if I have done open and I know sizable body subscribes to it, then I have done no wrong, and the consent is totally valid. Now, this is one case which will illustrate the difference between the real consent and informed consent. Now, in this case, this came in 2010. That is 2 years after the judgment, the previous judgment in which this principle was laid down. There is a malignant tumor it was actually adrenal tumor nestling in the left side of the abdomen, and in a surgical operation adopting an anterior approach in preference to posterior approach was done. Now, after that, patient developed pancreatic injury. There was pancreatic fistula. After that, there was formation of fecal fistula also. Patient constantly deteriorated. Second surgery was also done. There was temporary improvement. In Orani Institute, surgery was Orani Institute also, the procedures were done, but eventually patient died. And they were not able to save the patient. Now, patient plea in the court was that there were two approaches, anterior and posterior. And as I read from the book, and as I have come to learn, if they had adopted the posterior approach, pancreatic injury would not have occurred. And they never told me that there is another approach also, and it is more direct. And he kept on reciting the advantages of posterior approach from the book. So that was his plea. Since I have not been informed, maybe the outcome could be similar, but I should have been informed and should have been given the right to exercise by option. So guess what the court must have given judgment. Court said that anterior approach and posterior approach both are done, and perhaps there is greater literature in favor of anterior one. So your objection is purely academic and comes from the wisdom of hindsight. And Bolam principle is satisfied. They have adopted a principle which is already part of literature, so they are not negligent. Now, look at this judgment also. It is from High Court, but it illustrates that Bolam principle, that doesn't mean that it gives free leeway to the doctors. It also got constraints. Now, appendicectomy was done through gridiron incision. Appendix was found normal, but the symptoms and signs were of grave intra-abdominal infection. On lifting the upper border up, he could cite the gangrenous gallbladder, gangrenous fundus of the gallbladder. So he converted that into GA. It was gave a Cocker incision. It is 1985. Laparoscopy was not at that time common, and he failed to save the patient. And there was, the word chloroform is given the judgment, but it is halothane. There was halothane side effect. There was hepatic injury, and the patient died. Now, patient plea was that why did he remove the gallbladder when I have given the consent for appendix? And doctor said that I have done out of good faith. After all, it was to be removed. It was gangrenous. What was the option? Even if I had asked you, there was no other way of managing the problem. It is unfortunate that because of halothane complication has occurred, but it is not because of my decision. Now, imagine what would be now, according to Bolam principle, he has extended the operation and he has done the right thing. Instead of 2 sittings, he has finished the job in 1 sitting. It's only incidental that there is side effect, but no. The court said that Bolam principle is flexible or gives some liberty within the domain of the consent substance only. There can be broader application of the consent given, but you cannot trespass the domain of consent, and you can remove some very different organ. So you could not have removed the gallbladder when it has not been discussed at that time. So that was consent alien, meaning thereby that this premise that what I have done is practiced by most surgeons, is a reasonable thing according to my professional body. This will hold true only if you have not crossed the limits of autonomy altogether in your consent taking. This is from America, this consent form, and you can see that there are all the elements are there. The procedure, the nature, substance, and the nature is a hernia consent for open hernia, and all features you can see. This is the benefits that it will relieve my problem, and what benefits would be there, what are the risks on this, and all this have been mentioned, including inguinodynia, numbness, neuropathies, everything, and post-operative swelling, everything has been mentioned. And in last part of the consent, alternatives have also been mentioned. But, and then also note that physician has to put his signature and physician has to give all this information. But is this informed consent complete in all respects? Perhaps no. He has mentioned all the alternatives, but all the advantages and disadvantages need to be discussed. So if you look at this, if you keep on expanding the the scope of informed consent, it is infinite, and it is that is a practical difficulty. Is it all right? Hello.
Yeah, hello. Okay, go on.
Okay. So what are the other issues, which are important in consent? Some people say that video consent, very good idea, but then you must tell the patient that the consent is under video. You don't carry out kind of sting operation. He should also know that this is being documented, and he should be alert about his rights. Whatever question he wants to ask, he must line up and ask, and this is the moment. So there should not be asymmetry of information. Then who will take the consent? As I told you, in real consent, a person who is competent, who is well conversant with all the information that should be known to a doctor, he can take. And language, of course, since language, the patient must be familiar with that language. Now, consent to be signed by patient and witness. How many witness? There is no binding by the law. There can be one witness, two witnesses. Preferable is to have one witness from the hospital and one other witness from the outside, or maybe from other patient side, but then you have to keep record addresses, etc. That is cumbersome. But this issue is actually not very important. Now, consent for anesthesia. Now, in informed consent also, you must have seen the template that I have given. Consent for anesthesia is not included, so that has to be taken. Now, the advantage of real consent is that on behalf of anesthetist, a surgeon or a highly trained nurse, qualified nurse, who is well versed with anesthesia complications and who has got all the required brochures, information, etc., she can take the after fully explaining to the patient, she can take the consent. But that would be of nature of real consent, not informed consent, but this is allowable in our country. Informed, yes. I must tell here that in clinical trials, you have to take informed consent. That is a different area. My subject today is surgical consent. I am talking about consents in clinical setting, and real consent is allowable only in clinical settings, not in clinical trials. And informed consent law is given in Drug and Cosmetic Act 2016, Section 122 ED, and also by there are ICMR guidelines. According to that consent has to be informed. The authorities keep on issuing the consent forms which need to be filled. So don't confuse the clinical trial with the clinical settings. Procedure specific brochure. This is, I mentioned this. I have adopted this in part. This is a very useful thing. Both should be actually read together. This is has now come included in the guidelines issued by the Royal College of Surgeons, by Britishers who subscribe more to Bolam principle, although there also there is still towards the Canterbury. But essentially, now what they have while maintaining Bolam principle, how the respect to autonomy has been increased by supplying procedure specific brochures so that patient can read all information, and then they line up their questionnaire, give to the doctor, he answers all of them, and then only he gives the information. He cannot say that I have not been given. But then the unending to and fro conversation, the questions arising during the conversation in informed consent, they are put to a finite limit. Then requesting information forms. In British, they are adopting slowly the system of request to treat process, in which the patient will be given all this information in the form of brochures, information pamphlets, questionnaire, etc. And then patient, instead of giving consent, will make formal request to the doctors that I have heard you, I have gathered information from website, Google, etc., etc. And now I request you to do this kind of surgery on me. Just changing the equation altogether. That's a very good idea. We can also implement it. What I am doing, that I am asking, I am insisting that I have written the diagnosis. This is the keyword you Google out from all websites and use frame questions and give me the list of questions. I will answer all, and after that we will conclude our consent. And this can be easily in elective surgeries. There is no problem. And patient feel very satisfied with this. This is my experience. Emergency surgery may be done without consent. In fact, if patient is not in a position to consent, you cannot hold back surgery. High rate consent is a great, relief if there is any complication. So one must take high risk consent. You are familiar with this, so I will not go at length on this. So concluding only the consent portion, I will go to the second part. Indian law prescribes real consent and not informed consent in clinical settings. Real consent is less stringent as compared to informed consent. 3. In real consent, the degree of disclosure is not actionable as long as the patient has received treatment and information accepted by a reasonable professional body and that body considers it to be optimal. Now, with this, we come to end of the first element of this. Now, should I proceed with the second one? Are you with me?
Yes, we are with you.
Okay, now the second element is death. This is a very harrowing complication, death on table, but 90% of the surgeons experiences one or the other time in their lifetime. And when you have, especially when it is unexpected, you are not taking any high risk consent, then it is really bolt from the blue. And first thing is that you brace yourself. Wake up a fighter within yourself. That is done. Now you have to face the situation. You are the commander of the ship, and now you have to prevent it from sinking. And first important thing is that you have to inform police. Criminal Procedure Code 39 requires you to inform the police, whatever be the cause of death on the table. You can't escape it. Third, second important is that now you have to go through the torture of breaking news also. You can decide your priority accordingly, but since you have to inform the police on phone, you should immediately inform, send a person if available with a written request. Many assistants, then don't fill the record in a hurry and then overwrite it later on. If you don't have time, still certain truths which are hard to defend. It is one of them. I am not saying that you should be dishonest. I am just informing. Modify your priorities according to the circumstances. If you think that your patient is belligerent and they are going to create ruckus, then better to inform police for ensure that they are on the way before you break news. So you have to be a little tactful in that regard. And if there are task forces of your peer group like IMS sometimes and other associations also they form, or you may have your personal contacts, you might be helping each other. If there are colleagues who would come to your rescue, you should also alarm them and ask them to come if there, especially when there is possibility of mob violence. Now, what are the legal implications? That is actually the angle that I have to deal today. You see, when DOT has occurred, it is on the same footing as a death of a detainee occurs in police custody. Now, police are also doing good job, but when death occurs in their custody, then it is a big disaster. They are put to accountability. And now the whole burden of proof of your innocence is entirely on you. because the principle of res ipsa loquitur is there. That means the thing speak for itself. A mob is left in abdomen. There is no need for the complainant to prove any negligence. Things are speaking for itself. You have amputated the wrong limb. It is res ipsa loquitur. The things shall not begin from the burden of proof of innocence of the surgeon only. So now you have to tell only that what was the cause, that there was no lapse, and this was this was something for which you are not liable. And also, you remember that doctor and hospital both are liable. And if patient has come to hospital for his reputation, or hospital is at the interface, in that case, the liability of hospital is much more than doctors. In Kunal Saha case, the hospital was had to give 90-95% of the compensation, and doctors had to pay compensation only in terms of lakhs, 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs each one, whereas hospital had to bear the rest of the burden in 10 lakhs. So that must be covered. But then you cannot say that same thing will happen in this judgment. Also, sometimes patients follow doctors also. Doctors may also be put more liable, but you all are together into it. Don't fight with each other. You have to help each other together. Be a team. Now, breaking news. Lots of seminars have been done on this. I will not dwell in detail, and because that is not the area that I want to highlight today, but just for sake of completion, there are reactions of shock, pain, anger, depression, and you want to have good communication skills. You have to approach the matter compassionately. That is, if they are docile and complacent. If they are belligerent, of course, all this can put you in jeopardy. Then your approach would be very different. And then, if you find that they are in depression and they are, those kinds of conducive kind of patients, stay truthful. They have sympathetic approach. Even apology has been recommended here in this situation. Read non-verbal clues and then steer your conversation accordingly. Tears, silence, body language. Be sensitive to everything. The sense of disbelief, going into a long period of quiet, and allow for that shutdown process, allow for the possible denial. So all this have to be done very sensitively. You have to, but then again, I will not go in greater detail on this. Avoid putting blame on each other. Avoid contradicting each other's statements. This will be a very poor show in front of police as well as relatives who might be at the flashpoint of violence. And never make mistake of not informing police just because the patient is very cooperative and there is not likely to be any trouble. Sometimes trouble arises 3 or 4 days later, and then when it will be known that there was death on table, you didn't inform, you have done a very serious offense. Then trying to conceal evidence that should not be done, you should stick to truth. Remember, you are very safe, and that is the message of the talk that I am giving today. Actually, you are very safe in this situation. You are assailed by many problems all of a sudden because of this sudden disaster, but actually your position is very safe. Law has seen to it that the doctor remains safe, and don't doctor the records, don't alter the records, don't try to stick to truth, stick to honesty, and be bold. Now comes the real thing. Now, police, you have informed police. Police comes. Now, two possibilities. There either the complaint has been made by the patient party, and with that information he has come, or he has come on your invitation. Naturally, first Panchanama is being made. If complaint has been made, he will insist that you should give all papers, numbering should be done, and he may seize the ampules or other things which he thinks the evidence is important, and you should cooperate. Remember, he cannot arrest you. I will come again and again to that. Information to police, but then you will not block the investigation in any way. Anywhere you block the investigation or you did not cooperate, if God forbidding ever in future the need for bail arose, all these things will come up and you will be refused bail. So never do that. Cooperate fully. Information to police shall be preferably be in the writing. That I have already said. If information is telephonic, you and accordingly he has come, keep on record the buckle number, designation, etc. to who you are giving this. Then beside this, death certificate, registration of the death are other which other people should take care of. Now I will come to the most important legal aspect of this, that this Jacob Matthews versus State of Punjab, I was talking about the Supreme Court judgments. And this is the Bible of defense of medical negligence, if I want to say, or a handbook of defenses from medical negligence in India. If I say so, I am not, this is no overstatement. Very good judgment made by three judges. And when it is made by three judges, all of the judgments which I mentioned and are have been given till date are made by two judges. And this is known as judgment given by divisional bench. It is equivalent to your level 3 evidence. When I say Jacob Matthews, it is equivalent to level 2 evidence. And this is therefore sacrosanct. There is level 1 evidence is not available in law of medical negligence till date. That would come if there is a constitutional bench consisting of 5 judges or higher number, or it is always odd number for obvious reason, 5, 7, 9 up to 11. So it is the 3 bench always applicable. And what does it write? What does it say about this situation? A private complaint may not be entertained. It deals with the criminal negligence, and there will be always charge of criminal negligence in this context. A private complaint, now a complaint suppose is made by the patient party, that would be a private complaint. A private complaint may not be entertained unless the complainant has produced a prima facie evidence before the court in the form of a credible opinion given by another competent doctor to support the charge of rashness or negligence on the part of accused doctor. That is, if 3 to 5 days or afterwards it occurs to the patient that, oh, criminal negligence is done, and then he goes to police, he has to get this opinion of a medical expert. Police cannot even start to entertain him. And here also, when police is in your premises, police cannot start the any coercive proceedings, that is arresting you or anything of this sort, unless an expert opinion has been procured. Now further on, it writes what kind of opinion. Now it starts from the word the investigating officer. The investigating officer, that is the police officer, should before proceeding. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello, you can continue. You can continue, sir.
The investigating officer, before proceeding against the doctor accused of rash or negligent act of omission, and this is the situation when, say, police itself is trying to raise an allegation against you, or the other party is raising allegation against you, then what kind of expert opinion is to be procured by the police before they start any action against you? That is, and they have to obtain an independent and competent medical opinion. This is one point. Preferably from a doctor in government service. He should not be a rival professional, a rival practitioner. He may be biased. Third requirement, qualified in that branch of medical practice. Now, this is very oftenly, missed by the police. And in Pavaskar case also, the case of Ratnagiri, in which they were charged with section 304 for giving treatment on the phone, prescription on the phone, etc. So the investigation was not carried by qualified person in that branch of medical practice. There was a lacuna, but it was not pointed out by the lawyer in the court. It could have been assailed and they could have easily got the bail in the High Court, but it was not to be. Now, another condition is further on, who can normally be expected to give an impartial and unbiased opinion. So again, emphasizing that he should not be a rival practitioner from the same locality. And then he has to apply Bolam test. He should apply Bolam test there, which we have talked. So in this judgment also, the Bolam test has been approved to the facts collected in the investigation. So after this report has been given, and if it is not in favor, and all these conditions have been met, if these conditions have not been met, in that case, this expert opinion can be assailed in the court, and the doctor will get the advantage and would be immediately set free from every proceeding because of the deficiency in the process. This is very important. All of you must know and place this judgment in the hands of your lawyer if you are in this kind of situation and you have hired a lawyer. In fact, that is another thing that you can do when you are in that type of situation. Now, police investigation, I have said almost all the things while reading this judgment, cannot be arrested before opinion of medical expert. If a court report is adverse, then only the investigation officer can register a case against you. And he may register the case, that is FIR may be done under section 304, which is criminal negligence, reckless, this is reckless negligence, gross negligence, but this is bailable. If this particular section is slapped, bail is your right. In fact, as soon as you go to the police station, you can say that, Mr. give me bail, and this is the, I will fill the bond required, what is 3,000, 5,000, whatever is required. I have a surety and give me bail, even if there is no liar. Bail is your right, remember, in bailable offense. But unfortunately, many a times section 304(2) is applied. I will give you 2 instances which are not of death on table of other types of negligence, criminal negligence, where this 304(2), this is not to be applied, but there is an increasing trend. And 304(2) is that where you have knowledge that because of your act, a person will die. And though you have no intention, but you continue that act. For example, a tiger is chasing a person, a stranger, though he's a stranger to you, you don't have any vendetta, any hostility against that person, but you close the door on that person and the tiger injures that person fatally. So this is equivalent to 304(2). That is because of your action, though you knew you could help, but you didn't. And because of that, the person has died. This is non-available, attracts 10 years, 304 attracts 2 years. So both are on very, very different pedestal. And bail for 304(2) is not easy. This is in which Pavastar couple of Ratnagiri was stuck. And then I also intervened. I will come to that later. Now, never forget that when you are in this type of situation, and if there has been any violence on your person or your property, make a counter FIR, very effective. This helps in bargaining, afterwards. So that you must do, that is your right also. Medical protection in Maharashtra is very robust, more robust, I will reveal here, than the proposed central law which was in the making, but then Home Ministry did not approve it. Luckily for us Maharashtrians that it was not approved. The Maharashtrian law that we already have is much more harsh than the proposed central law. But then people don't know and just support the wrong thing. So these are the examples of 304(2) charge, which I said that are very serious, and these are made. This is Hitwada, and it is 2018. A boy got his neck injured while traveling on a cycle from rods which are projecting from back of a vehicle. Got injured his neck, which started bleeding profusely. Within 40 minutes, he reached the threshold of a hospital. That doctor could not come or whatever, that is not clear. But then he declared the patient dead and asked them to go to GMC. When he went GMC in their record, they mentioned resuscitation for 15 minutes. So, well, this was a record. And advocates of High Court, they filed a petition that the doctor should be booked under 304(2), because what he has done, if the patient was alive, if he had given first aid, he would have survived. So this was very unfortunate. When I came to know about it, I intervened in this matter. I have consciously obscured the name of the person against who the case was because of the confidentiality issues. I don't have his consent, so I have to, but this is important, and you can see that I have intervened here, and I did so in person, and I argued in the court myself, and then I gave 100 pages long submission, and then detailed that when a person is injured at this place, he's just like a slaughtered animal, slaughtered sheep, and he would die in a matter of minutes, whatever you do. And the non-intervention by the so-called accused is not at all detrimental. It should be mother of all causes when you impute with criminal negligence. That is what action is held to be. Action leading to injury, that should be paramount. That should be the main action leading and not a side issue. Here, the patient has died because of fatal injury to the neck. He was already bled. Totally he was drained of blood. by the time he reached there. So no matter what that doctor has done, it would not have made difference. And then saying that he was alive, it is anybody's guess. Sometimes, like, non-medical may find it difficult to believe. I said it there, that sometimes diagnosis of death is very difficult. There may be fine movement of the pupil which might be missed. There may be very faint pulse which might be missed clinically. But then it was clear from the history that he was beyond the point of salvageability. And in the estimation of the doctor to who this patient went, he also knew that he is beyond a point of salvageability. So precise diagnosis in this situation is not important because it cannot translate into salvageability. So when salvageability is zero, where is the question of any negligence? Not to talk of 304.2, which is not even 304A. Why talk of 304A? It is not even civil negligence because the patient is a goner, unfortunately, by that time. And in why is recidiva there? When go to casualties, sometimes they give it a chance. We know this, that sometimes junior people, they give it a chance, give some resuscitation. That might be. It might be resuscitation should not be taken as a firm diagnosis of life, in that particular setting. So, the outcome was favorable, so to say. This is the Pavaskar case. Now, it is another case in which the same 304.2 was slapped on the Pavaskars just because they gave prescription on the phone. This was the only problem, that they have not given this. Now, medical expert opinion was sought by the police. Note this here. It was sought by the police. And medical expert opinion, who was CMO, where he gave the report which is unfavorable, that they have given treatment without looking at the patient. This is against the fundamentals of clinical practice. And that's why, since they have not seen the patient, they might have diagnosed the patient, could have done to save the patients. On that basis, the court acted. You can't actually blame the court. Court will take the call according to the material available in front of them. And that's why it so happened. And court came to believe that it was a heinous offense. Doctor failure to exercise the degree of care and skill that a physician surgeon in the medical field would arise under similar circumstances would amount to malpractice. And error in diagnosis could be negligence and covered under section 304A, which is the gross negligence of the Indian Penal Code. But she says that here the situation has gone one step ahead. What does she say? But this is a case of prescription without diagnosis and therefore culpable negligence, meaning thereby manslaughter under the meaning of 304.2 IPC, which I detailed earlier. The element of criminality is introduced not only by a guilty mind, but by practitioner having run a risk of doing something with recklessness and indifference to the consequences. It should be added. So she held 304.2, she denied bail, and then the media was replete with the reports like prescription of diagnosis of culpable negligence, Bombay High Court to Dr. Kapal. Then IMA also pitches in and say what IMA says. Telephonic consultation is strict? No. I mean, this kind of thing, IMA should do all these things very responsibly. IMA on patient safety. IMA itself ratified the call, the decision made by the court. We should also restrain and think, and amongst our bodies, we should make a responsible policy decision. The life and welfare of our colleagues depends upon it. Now, MCI also said the same thing. Online consultation may lead to suspension of doctor's license, medical counsel issue. I was personally highly agreed with this. I knew that the couple is totally faultless. They are innocent, and I am also doing it every day. I am telling my treatment to my nurses on phone every day. I am doing. They only should not be behind the bars. I too should be also behind the bars. I was so moved by this that I approached Supreme Court. So you can see this is a Deepa Sanjeev Pavaskar, and I intervened. And you can see that I did so without any lawyer's help. I was making my submission myself. And in the court, I detailed, giving this type of references, I gave many actually, that this is a subject to systemic reviews. It is something very important, and it is required for the society. This telemedicine is the need of the time. Why we are hell-bent on pushing ourselves to the age of bullock cart by making it a judicial principle? They were given bail. no issues. And then after that, now you see what has happened. After 1 year, my thoughts have been redeemed. They get a sanction. After COVID, Medical Council of India only has legalized it, and with great pomp and show. And when wide-ranging liberty has been given, more than it was ever was, more than in most of the other countries. And there are very few limitations, for few limitations, and the charges of misconduct are also, applicable only in extreme instances. If you are blackmailing somebody, or you are advertising, or you are infringing the principle of privacy, or you are forcing somebody to take treatment online only, though the other person wants to come in person, and such like. Otherwise, full liberty. In fact, you can create a platform and you can run a virtual multi-consultant clinic online. So, and compare with that, what 1 year back, same MCI wrote that online consultation may lead to suspension of doctor license. So we must assert our fundamental rights, go to courts, and that is very important. Since I have already taken so much time, I will omit this telemedicine guidelines, and I come to conclusions that when there is a death on table, don't lose a nerve. Prioritize the list of actions that to inform police always. Surgeons cannot be arrested for DOT. Forget that. Jacob Matthew's judgment, keep it in hand. Give that paragraph. Policeman may not understand. Call lawyer. And if he doesn't understand, he is going to lose his job. If inquiry by medical expert goes against you and alleges criminal justice, then bail is your right. A complaint is under 304A. 304(2) is extreme. Remember me if that ever happens. And registering complaints under IPC 304 is extremely unfortunate, must be challenged in High Court under Section 40. So while concluding, I must pay a salute to these soldiers, frontline soldiers, my colleagues, and my heart is with them. They are fighting the real battle. And I'm also proud of my organization, which is liberally, they are getting the contributions to get PPE. I also contributed to Prime Minister Fund in the hope that I will get tax deduction under ATG. But now I am feeling that there is not going to be so much income that tax deductions would be relevant. So I should be contributing here also. But why I have shown this slide? That it is very good. It's a hats off to organization for doing all this. But also equally important is that we should take this matter to court, file a petition that there should be no holdover PPEs from our colleagues. That can be detrimental. It looks to be a long battle. We will continue like this only, and this movement will continue. But then there is limitation to private collection. So we must go file a petition. Some organization should support me. I can do it for free. There is no expense involved as long as I am there. But I do need support. There are technical reasons that if I go along this time, this may not be entertained for reasons. These are technical reasons. I cannot go into that here. Thank you very much for patiently listening.
Thank you, sir. It was a great lecture, and hats off to you. You are doing great help to the society by participating in all these Supreme Court and High Court matters. Really hats off to you. My question is, I have two questions, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are perfectly audible. And I'm happy that you are having two questions. I thought people
I have two questions.
Somnolence because it's a non-clinical subject.
Sir, if the patient has given a consent for cholecystectomy and for some reason we are not able to complete the procedure, we are doing subtotal cholecystectomy. So what is the implication? That is the first question.
You have done the right thing. Absolutely no. This is what the Bolam principle is. Informed consent, if you are not informed, it is not documented, you may be in trouble. That, if say suppose there is some problem, partially your gallbladder may be left there in situ. Informed consent is so wide ranging that it makes you vulnerable all the time. If suppose you are not documented in your consent, it will make you vulnerable. But in India, we are in the regime of real consent for now. And real consent is Bolam principle. What you have done, information you have already given about cholecystectomy, you had given adequate information, but it happens to fall outside its purview. Unfortunate. But this is an accepted procedure by a responsible professional body. It can be very easily demonstrated, so no problem.
Okay. And the second question might be from the different from your topic, media management, which is coming up a big thing. We have to manage patient, we have to manage the patient's relative, we have to manage
Which management?
this.
COVID
We have to
management.
manage patient, relative, police, court, and we have to also manage the media. So,
You are talking
any
about
comment?
death on table or some other context?
No,
Or this
in this
COVID infection?
context.
In which context?
No, not only COVID.
He probably means a death on table. How to
No, no,
manage the
Death
media.
on table.
Actually, the transmission is breaking. Yes, I am not able to get that. In which context? What is the background context for this question? It is death on
Any
table.
case where any case where police is involved.
Any
Police
unfortunate unfortunate incidents has happened. It may be death in ICU, it may be death in ward, it may be any other thing, right?
Yeah.
And there is violence. There is, you are talking about that?
Yes.
Yes. What is your question? What we can do about it?
See, we have talked about how to deal with the patient in this consent. We have talked about how to take consent. The patient is to be involved, the relatives are to be involved. But if the mishaps occur, then we have to tackle the patient, told to the patient, told to the relatives, tell to the relative that this thing has happened, there is a mishap. Then police is involved, the IMA is involved, and the media is also involved. So how to manage any 2 weeks to manage this media?
Manage this media. Now, how the media got the access, you need to see the specifics of each circumstances would be different. Well, it is not actually a question in dealing with the legalities directly. It is a question dealing with the social behavior. But then media, if it is like in this case also, which I told you, the media role was there. They only disseminated this information in Pavaskar case also and in first case also. So media is always playing mischievous role for the sake of increasing its readership. They are sensationalizing the issues. That is there. But as far as if you are really, you feel very strongly about it, you can sue them also. But the thing is that these are far-fetched remedies. And at that rate, you will keep on suing everybody. And what is your immediate concern? Immediate concern is that mob violence can be there. I told you that try to involve the police early on slightest premise, involve the police immediately. And if IMA has found a body that people come to your rescue or any other body, you can on your different levels, you can constitute such rescue teams if they can come, or you can hire professional security for this. In fact, for a hospital of your size, you should have professional security. No reason that you should not have. You should, keep some money for that as such eventuality. Because if there is violence and damage of property, your stakes are very high. So yes, you can hire security also on contract, and you can pay them according to the incidents. So that for you, mob violence, unless police comes and does something actively, you have to do that according to your facilities, your resources, and what else you can think of. And if there is damage to your property, then you invoke the law. And I tell you, this is another problem with us. The situation would not have degenerated to this point. Now, whenever incidents of violence occurs, it is commonly seen that the victim goes to commissioner of police, or body of doctors goes and gives a bouquet to police or commissioner, tell them to take action, tell them to educate the police department about this protection law. They don't take any action, they don't arrest anybody. This is the frequently it is done, and then it fizzles out after some time, and then you find WhatsApp thumbs up on such photographs or selfies taken. No, that is not the course actually you should take. You should immediately, if police has not registered FIR, you should go to magistrate the very next day, because when they don't register FIR, they always give you something known as NCR, non-cognizable report, which they should not be given according to Maharashtra Protection Act. You should go to this. You can go to High Court also under Article 226, complaining that police has not taken proper action. Actually, this is the kind of action you should be taking on police. Otherwise, they will never cooperate. They will never behave. And this, what is the problem? I thought of going to Supreme Court, making a public interest litigation against the rampant violence. But the problem is, I don't have answer to one question if Supreme Court asks me. That in the instances that you are telling us, why doctors have not invoked the law, proper law. If police has not done the action, it is not the end of the story there. You go to the magistrate, he will take the cognizance, then he will order the police to do it. And even magistrate refuses, then you go file a mandamus petition in the High Court. And then if that also will then come to us. So I can't justify the jurisdiction. But the problem is that we just believe in empirical palliative measures. We don't behave like surgeons there. We should be more precise in our approach. Police is your culprit when they are not taking the required action. Why you are giving bouquets to them? Why you are felicitating them? Your approach is not correct. And that's why these incidences don't come to harm. Police is not doing its job because they get away with it every time. Nobody thinks of this line of action. I was never victim myself. Otherwise, I would have done it. On behalf of others, I have to justify if I am doing a public interest litigation. If that person, I cannot justify, I cannot speak on behalf of others. I am not an advocate yet. And I don't propose to be. I just will acquire degree for purpose of, such suits only, where I can, my credit worthiness increases in the courts. It is for that purpose only. Yes.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Hello.
I invite the questions from the audiences.
Hello, Prashant. Before that, I'll make a small comment. Congratulations and thank you on behalf of ASN and VHA to Prashant and Yogesh for arranging all these webinars in these difficult times. I have a few questions for you, Arora sir, though you have made it amply clear in your exhaustive lecture. My first question is, in the case where a patient was taken up for appendicectomy and a gangrenous gallbladder was found, what should have been the correct option? You mean the case should have been closed and then opened up at a later date?
You see, the ideal approach is that you close the abdomen and take the consent afresh and then go back. This is what law demands, according to. But I have seen Dr. Rahate also saying this, and before I heard him, I was also practicing this, that it is not a bad idea that you go outside, talk to relatives, tell them that this has happened, bring them in OT, demonstrate the gallbladder, and if it is final, you can talk to girl also, explain to them, give them time to think, take the consent and then proceed. Although this can be faulted, by the way. But then if you want to do, this is the closest thing that you can defend in the court. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my second question is, you mentioned something about the consent specific to the procedure and some brochures. So like suppose you're operating on a case of appendicitis or a planned hernia. What brochure or what specific procedure consent are you taking?
What I am doing is that I have found a general consent form, right, which needs to be explained. Patient will not sign a dotted line. Then I ask, everything is not given. It will be very exhaustive document and very tedious to explain everything. And it will, create more doubts than it will clarify. So the best thing is that most of them, they have Google. Google is now available in vernacular also. Now there is no reason that they should not get the information for themselves. They have some duty about to themselves also. they should also tend to acquire information. Now they have an information tool in their hand. Why they're not using it? So I write on the prescription that writing on a hernia, this, suppose I have an open operation, and then I tell them that this laparoscopic approach is also there, but I recommend open in your case, and all this information is available on this web. These are the keywords you put, you will get all the information. Laparoscopy, hernia, all this, and there are many pamphlets, and some of them I have got the printouts, I supply to them, in vernacular only. You read them and line up your questions. This is being recommended by the Royal College of Surgeons. It is in line of real consent,
But actually, if we follow the American method or the British method of consent taking, more than half our patients will not be willing to sign, especially in elective procedures.
No. You're mistaken. No, you're mistaken. You're sadly mistaken. No, they appreciate. They will appreciate. You try this. See, okay. I agree that you giving every information in person, in first person, is very difficult, very long. You don't have time. You don't have inclinations. It's very boring also. I agree. I can't do it. So this is the middle path, and this has got the sanctity.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. The forum is open for discussion for the audience.
Sir, we have first question from Dr. Dasgupta sir. He is online. Dasgupta sir, I have unmuted your mic. You can ask the question to Arora sir.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Arora. Can you hear me?
Hi, sir. Yes, sir.
Hi. A very absorbing talk. I mean, I am now looking at you with a different perspective, more as a lawyer than a surgeon. Anyhow, I had no idea that you had so in-depth knowledge of the legalities as far as the surgeries are concerned. Anyhow, I mean, before I ask a question, let me make a comment. I mean, this consenting, improper consent, who should take a consent, what to write in a consent, we must have had so much discussions, but still I am very sorry to say that this is still continuing to be the most neglected part in our surgical practice. Still I see so many surgeons relying on the nurses or the junior most person in the unit taking the consent. I would say only the nursing staff has been given this responsibility to take the consent. And that is why when such complications occur, it is the doctor who comes into the soup. Now my question, Arora, I mean, at our RST, there was some controversies that with this COVID thing going on present, that there should be some special consent taken if you are to undertake any elective surgery in this COVID pandemic which is going on. What is your opinion?
In principle, elective surgery, once we use this word, then it is actually not allowed, elective surgery. Once you label yourself that it is elective surgery, the directive is that you stop all elective surgeries.
No, we are doing surgeries for malignancy. Now, where will you put cancer?
Sir, it is perfectly your choice. You may call it emergency, you may call it semi-emergency, but if you yourself are labeling it as elective, then you are putting me in a quandary. Because my answer would begin from that only, that if you call it elective surgery, then you cannot do it. Now, say emergency surgery or semi-emergency surgery. Yes, of course, you have to. Yes.
I say for example, a CA colon, I want to do a hemicolectomy. What will you call, elective or it's an emergency surgery?
You see, it depends. If there are, say, acute manifestation, there is obstruction.
No. Arora, what I mean to ask you is that even if it is say an emergency surgery, I mean, do we need to tell the patient that the COVID epidemic is going on and you may contact corona infection from a silent carrier?
Yes, I think so, yes. One should tell that. That should be done. That would be respecting the autonomy, and it takes no time. It's so evident, and patient would just respect this, disclosure, and would not be affected by it mostly.
Right. Another question, Arora. Now, regarding the complications, now going by the textbook, if in every, while explaining to the patient, there is an unending list of complications ending with death. Even as the simplest of surgery can also end in death because of some unforeseen reason. It may be unrelated to the surgery. The patient may die of myocardial, patient may have a vasovagal, patient may have an anaphylactic shock, whatnot. So to what extent should we explain the complication of a given surgery?
Sir, that was what my talk about it is. I wrote a sentence today in our group that it would be empowering. Yes, this is what empowerment is. That we must understand that we come under the doctrine of real consent. Now, in this situation, suppose there is a hernia and then he later died of thromboembolism, right? This could be one situation.
Yeah.
You have not talked about this. Let us look at this. Now, if patient of hernia dies of this, I will, and suppose he takes to this legal suit on this count that I was not told about thromboembolism. Had he told me about this eventuality, I would not have undergone surgery.
Yes.
By in Bolam principle, according to Bolam principle, I have told all the risks. The word inherent is important. You remember, I use the word inherent. The word inherent is paramount. The word inherent to the procedure, and my amount of disclosure would be one which is just full according to reasonable professional group. So I will just take Lavin Valley. Sir, this is hernia. These are the complications mentioned. I have told everyone, and this will acquit me of all the responsibilities. It's not that he will show me that, well, in this book it is written that thromboembolism can happen after this. My choice. This is what is that centrality of doctor is more important in real consent. This is what I'm emphasizing, and that is what empowers you. So I will just say that these are the complications of hernia. I have explained all the complications to him, and even this Canterbury type of consent, which I saw a while ago, I showed this taken some American hospital. All complications pertaining to hernia only are mentioned. So if in Canterbury principle this can be done, in real consent there is absolutely no problem. You are supposed to tell only those complications which can happen, which are within range of feasibility, which are within range of plausibility. It's not that rarest of the rare you touch. Now, tomorrow he might have thrombophlebitis because of IV injection, very common, and sometimes it becomes annoying. Sometimes you have to excise it. Sometimes it forms abscess. He may go later on this, and due to bad aesthetic results after all this, that I want compensation. They never informed me that this can happen. So there is no end to it. But real consent puts an end to it. There is a finite limit to which you will be explained what doctor thinks is proper according to his professional body, reasonable professional body.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aruna.
And that is this was the message that I wanted to convey. That's why I said that the answer is surprising, but empowering too. This is your empowerment. You need not have any guilt on it, and you are not liable, and doesn't make you vulnerable if it is a remote complication.
Sir, can I add to one point about Dasgupta sir's question about malignancy getting operated, emergency or semi-emergency? Sir, the Surgical Oncology Society has come up with a guidelines in which they have said all those malignancies which can be dealt with a neoadjuvant therapy should not be operated, like CA esophagus, CA rectum, head neck face malignancy should not be operated. Even CA stomach, you should give perioperative chemotherapy, which is a standard of care nowadays. For colon malignancy, small bowel malignancy, periampullary or Whipple's like thing, you have to go in and do the surgery immediately, even with COVID. That is what guidelines have said.
It can be done with COVID. What was the last sentence?
So even with COVID, the surgeries in which there is no role of neoadjuvant therapy, they should be done in a malignancy setup.
Yes. No, they can be done, but then you have to inform the patient. The question was about informed consent part. You have to inform the patient. It is an important development. How you will not take this into, suppose patient develops any injury because of any damage because of this, why you would take responsibility? This should be explained.
Yeah. Sir, we have questions from Dr. Girish Mirajkar, sir. I'll unmute his mic. Girish, sir, please unmute your mic and ask the question. Dr. Girish Mirajkar. Hello. I guess he's not available.
Am I audible?
Huh.
Am I audible?
Yes. Go ahead.
Two of my questions have already been answered. In case of intraoperative consent for open cholecystectomy. My second question is, I have two more questions. One is the anesthetist legally liable for any anesthetic consent which have to be taken? And second is, could you elaborate more on requesting information that you talked about?
Okay. The first question is anesthesia consent. Now, ideally, according to informed Canterbury concept, the anesthetist himself should take the consent and should make a separate document for it. That will be ideal. In corporate hospitals, maybe at places it is implemented where there are in-house anesthetists, they can do it very well. It is ideal. You should respect the autonomy. But in standalone hospitals like mine, for me it would be difficult calling anesthetist beforehand, and if consent is being taken honestly, the patient may be scared away, so all effort will be wasted. Now, in real consent, I have mentioned it during my narrative that any person who is well conversant with the facts and is capable is having elementary knowledge about that matter that requires to be shared with the patient, he can take consent on the behalf of the specialist himself. So surgeon can take consent of anesthesia on their behalf. That means the anesthesia consent form can be integrated into general surgical consent form, because there is a general surgical consent form and then there are certain clauses which are specific to the condition. So you can club anesthesia consent along with that part. And surgeon or any person who has got that credential, that is a highly qualified nurse, for example, a very senior resident doctor, they can very well do this conduct in real consent part. In UK, they are routinely doing this. Nurses are doing this. They provide, and I coming to the answer of second question also. They are providing brochures, right? That you read all this, and then this is the questionnaire. You write your question. Doctor will answer everything. First, she will answer if she thinks that there are certain questions which doctor needs to answer. Those questions are answered by that. And after that, he has to make a request. Please understand. Here, what we are doing, that we are seeking consent from the patient that can we operate upon you? No, they are just reversing the whole thing. Now, the patient will be given all the information that he wants to have from all sources that he wants to have. After that is done, now patient will do the formality and write to you in your name that doctor, please do this surgery on me for this condition. I have equipped myself with the required knowledge. So this is known as request to treat process, which is coming up in England.
Sir, next question is from Dr. Govind Kodwani. Govind sir, I have unmuted. Yeah, Govind sir. Please unmute your mic, Govind sir, and ask the question. Dr. Govind Kodwani sir. Hello, Dr. Govind sir. He is not available. Next question is from Dr. Jindra Gidam sir. Dr. Gidam sir, please ask your question. I have unmuted your mic. Gidam sir, go ahead. Gidam sir, you are online. Go ahead. Hello. So he has written a question here. Arora sir, I'll write that question. Ask that question. It's consent.
Is our adorable Dr. B.S. Gedam?
No, Khijendra Gedam.
Okay. Right.
So he has written, is the consent to be handwritten by patient himself or by relative? Will it be okay if a surgeon write it for them and get it signed after?
Yes, you can have printed form, no problem. But then the language should be one which can be understood by the patient, right? Which is demonstrably understood by the patient. You have to explain everything. You should be adding extra clauses. You should leave room for that. And you should write that to give it more authenticity if any special question has been asked. But otherwise, it would be tedious writing it yourself every time. So yes, you can have printed form. You can leave room for that. I'm talking about the real consent, and you can yes, it is okay.
Sir, next question is by Dr. Mukund Thakur, sir. Thakur, sir, I have unmuted your mic. Please go ahead. Thakur, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Pradeep Arora, it was an excellent lecture, and as I can see, most of the questions are revolving around that consent only. So here is my suggestion to you that if you make your consent form available for the peruse of everybody, then we would love to have it. One thing. Second is whether you mention that in the consent that you have asked the patient to search the websites and take the information on the websites. And the other question is what is the right time to take consent? Because many a times what happens, patient comes to us in the OPD and then we give all the information and then ask him to get admitted on a particular day. Maybe it is 15 days after the first consultation. So whether we should take a consent on the day of on which we consult or the patient consults us, or on the day of surgery.
See,
Hello.
yeah, I got it. Yeah, I have, I heard you. See, as far as the law that I have read is silent about this subject. Now, I cannot assume authority to answer it, but then I will apply the legal sense of whatever little I have acquired through my studies. It actually does not make difference if is a 1 day or 2 day or whatever, if difference is there, unless there is some development in between which would have altered the terms of consent. And some new facts, clinical fact has emerged, which could have any bearing on the outcome. Otherwise, it doesn't make difference as long as the interval is very small, and the loyalty, fidelity to the terms of consent are intact.
Okay. Second part was whether you can make your consent available for all of us to go through.
I will do that if you insist. But see, you give somebody bread, he will do eat on that particular day and be satiated. But if you teach somebody how to fish, then he is a bread earner throughout his life. There is a quotation something to that effect. So I have put it in my own words. So
See,
I have a concept. It is not difficult at all. But then, for guidance, I will put on website only. Yes.
Not only that, what I feel personally is, since this is a most important part of our treatment, taking a consent, particularly in the surgical field. So if a association like us or the MCI actually gives us the guideline as to how the consent should be, then there are disease specific consents.
Yes.
If a particular association comes up with a format,
Actually, this is responsibility of your association only to make it for subjects. It is your association that would, if you make a consent, then the court, anybody can say this is thought to be reasonable by the professional body, our professional body. So it has to be accepted.
That's why I'm suggesting that if it comes from the association and we all follow the same thing after having
it should be formally adapted by the association. And
that's what I feel.
Step on it, then everybody is safe.
Yeah, so that there is no controversy regarding the subject.
Yes,
whenever.
But I tell you one thing, that love is this law is not as static as one would like to assume. Law is very dynamic process. There may be any judgment tomorrow which might have some influence on it. There might be a Clinical Establishment Act may be passed tomorrow, implemented in Maharashtra, which might have some impact on it. So remember that it is a dynamic thing. It is in a constant stage of flux. It's not that you design a draft today and then it is going to last forever. And association will also have to adapt it, make changes from time to time according to changing law.
Yeah, that is perfectly justified, and one should I think it is a high time that we should think on this particular aspect and design some standard consents for at least routine procedures. Hello.
Yes.
What's your take on
Yes.
this, sir? Yeah.
Yeah, it should be, process should be like this. I should draft it, then a committee should be there. It should, sanction it, and then through the formal process, Association of Nagpur or whatever, it should put its stamp and seal over it and make it authentic.
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Dr. Kodwani, sir, please unmute your mic. Dr. Govind, sir, you have a question. Please unmute your mic and start question. Dr. Govind, sir, you are online. Please start your mic. Okay. By that time, Dr. Prashant Bhaute, sir. Yeah, Prashant Bhaute, sir.
Hello, Arora sir.
Hanji, hello. Yes.
Good evening, sir. Sir, few comments before I ask the question. Dr. Desai's and Dr. Thakur's question about the specific consent. Yes, on net there is Royal College of Australia, which gives a specific consent. We at Care Hospital, where both of you are also part of it, we have got a lot of specific consents for the common procedures which are carried out. I can share with you anytime. There is no problem. Then second, Dr. Desai said that people will get afraid of if they tell you the complications. Believe me, it has been 12 years that I am being telling. Even after 500 lab colis, the 501, I'll tell them that there is a chance of CBD injury, which is 3 to 5%. Until now, 98% have been converted to surgery. 2% if they have left, it is good for me. Then regarding Dasgupta sir's question about COVID, we have been doing some surgeries, emergency surgeries in this COVID scenario. And we are writing it on paper on the specific and generic consent that there is an incidence of you catching the COVID because of me, because of hospital, because of your relatives, or because of anything per se. It is up to you whether to get operated by me or not, or in this hospital. But yes, there is an incidence of COVID you getting. Now coming to my question, sir. First question is, many of the times the patient relatives ask whether the surgery is minor or major. As all surgeries carries risk of death, even a biopsy carries a death. Recently we have learnt in the newspaper that a minor biopsy has led into death, leading to the arrest of a doctor. So do we comment procedures like minor or major? My take is, I say all surgeries are major. What's your take?
It is individual take. You see, there is no legal obligation for you to, there is no legal guideline. It is your perception. You may call a particular procedure for a hydrocele minor. Somebody may call it major. No, it has all the attributes, all the features of major. Opinions can differ, but it doesn't translate into any legal obligation and translate into any serious legal issue. So it is your take. It is not important at all. And like you said, death. Now, I have already clarified in my talk also and questions coming after this that remote complications need not be mentioned. You have the therapeutic privilege or withholding those very, very rare complications which can occur, but which will develop patient necessarily. So you have that therapeutic privilege in real consent. But then look around. Most of our professionals, are they talking about death when they are removing small cysts? No. So you should not. So there is absolutely no point. So whatever is sensible and appeals to common sense, you should follow that. There is no serious legal issues involved in it. So don't think in a complicated way about something which is very simple. The consent forms that you have said, all those are Canterbury principle is Australian are harshest type of consent forms, which it is very good. You have got all the freedom to subscribe to Canterbury principle of informed consent. There is no problem. But only thing is that I think so that why you should increase your liabilities? Why you should call it informed consent when law requires only real consent? If you will say that I have taken informed consent, you have committed to the patient. You have promised to the patient that I am undertaking your case on the basis of informed consent. Then informed consent has become a binding upon you, according to Indian contract law. Because this is the meaning that you have reached, an eternal consensus. That is important. So that will be the position now. So you don't give it any label, whether it is informed consent, it's just consent. But if it is convenient to you, real consent, that is adequate for the law at present.
Right. Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Hello?
My second question is, sir, we have always learnt about that there are FIR against the patient. Now, if a patient is negligent or your relative is negligent, then can a doctor file an FIR against the relatives? For example, I put a CBD stent and the patient has forgotten that CBD stent for 2 years, and then he has come with cholangitis, sepsis, and death. So that is the negligence of the patient. Second example of leukemia pneumonia, where the relatives gives kerosene to the patient who has got seizures, and then the kerosene gets absorbed and leads to leukemia pneumonia and ultimately death. So does the hospital have the right, or the doctor has a right, to file an FIR against the relatives?
You see, anybody has got the FIR to file FIR against anybody. But you are doing at your own peril. First, check your facts. Are your facts correct? Criminal complaint can be made can be made even by a third party. Remember this, of cognizable offense, not of non-cognizable offense. Here you are charging a kind of murder equivalent kind of charge, that there is reckless negligence and that has resulted in death. They are actually trying to murder him. It is a cognizable offense, but then you have to check your facts. If your complaint is frivolous, then police can take action. That person can also take action. If you are ready to face contend with all this, you can do it. There is no stopping you from filing any complaint. Definitely.
Okay. My last question is, sir, most of the times it has been seen right from my residency days that in India we gave more weightage to the relative signature than the patient signature. The patient is kept in abeyance and the relatives are counseled more. And even at the time of surgery, when the relative says, suppose there is a malignancy, don't tell it to the patient. He is of BP, he has got sugar, he is of less heart, and so on and so forth. Their excuses are there. So is the patient or the relative signature, which is mandatory? I know patient signature is mandatory, but India, it is exactly opposite. We give more importance to the relatives rather than to the patient.
No, your perception that in India it is, don't universalize it, please. It may be that according to your perception, the importance is given more to but then it is not everybody's practice. It's not everybody's perception. We are always giving more importance to the patient, and he is never left in abeyance. And withholding information from a patient, yet temporarily we can subscribe to their relatives. But if we find on follow up that there is any foul play, that they don't want to, so that they can neglect him, then I always tell the patient, it may be a bitter pill, well, then it has to be swallowed.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sir, next question is from Dr. Govind Kodwani, sir. Sir, please go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Very practical and very informative CME. Congress to VSA. Coming to my point, sir. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Sir, my point is, I have seen one patient clinically feels appendicitis. Send for sonography. Sonography also reported as appendicitis. But when I opened the patient, it turned out to be Meckel's diverticulum, which is necrosed one and needs removal.
Yeah, this is very
so as far as, sir, the consent was taken for appendicectomy, as you said in your elaboration earlier, that when the consent was taken for appendicectomy and it turned out to be a gangrenous gallbladder, so it's a deviation from Boehm's principle. What should I do?
It is not deviation.
So, sir, we have taken the consent for appendix.
Yeah.
We have taken the consent for appendix, and now we found gangrenous Meckel's diverticulum. So, sir, should we inform at that point of time to the patient relatives who are waiting outside the OT, or should we go ahead with the removal of the Meckel's?
I tell you one thing. If
Yes, sir.
your surgery involves the feature which can be described as amputation of an organ, then consent is mandatory. Separate consent is mandatory. And here there is a small digression from this. And then again, this is not unfamiliar scenario that you are telling.
Yes, because sonography,
Yes.
sonography could not differentiate between appendix and Meckel's.
If suppose there is any controversy, you can always show that this is accepted practice. Many surgeons will give affidavit on your behalf that yes, whatever he has done is quite okay. This is we are all doing it. So it is done through same this thing, and the two can be frequently confused also. So this is within the ambit of probability, and this is a familiar scenario and doesn't involve amputation of any organ. So,
sir, should we? Yes, sir.
The type of anesthesia was changed. An incision was given, and then an organ was amputated. So it was too far away from the main surgery.
Sir, my another thing in the same line, that it is found that 19 to 40% of appendix which looks grossly normal, they turns out to be pathological. Should we go ahead with appendectomy in the same sitting as far as Meckel's is also concerned? We have removed the Meckel's. It's not Boehm's deviation as you said. Should we keep appendix there, or should we remove it, as we have taken the consent for appendectomy also?
See, you are not extending the procedure. What you are adding is a very small one. So you have to take your call yourself. But only thing is that you should be able to justify it. Suppose in the court you are liable, you should be able to produce a material the way you would convince anybody else. Sir, this is the material, this is written in the book, this can be done. 3 surgeons are giving affidavit that we are also doing it. And considering all this material, the court will say it is fine. And when no injury has been done.
Right, sir. Right.
In fact, the point is that the patient died. There was halothane side effect. The patient died. So here, and there was direct nexus with his intervention. Here, there is, you suppose you can appendectomy, even if something, some bad outcome is eventuated after this, it doesn't have direct nexus proximity with what you have done.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Govind, sir. Now we have last question from Dr. Vijay Agrawal. Vijay, are you online? Vijay? Yeah.
Sir, whether
Vijay,
we should have we should have ICU facility in nursing home before any operation?
Yes, there was a judgment, and there was a lot of this message was made viral and a lot of circulation that ICU facility should be. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We are.
No, you see, there as far as the judgment, I myself told that judgments have this kind of effect, but there are many caveats. What I told you was oversimplification. When we apply the decision of any judgment, then there are certain things which need to be evaluated. One is that what was the ratio? Technically, in law, it is known as ratio. Whether it was just a side remark or it was actually determined, analyzed, and scrutinized by the court, and then this conclusion or inference was drawn. It has to be ratio for it to be applied to other this thing, and not just a side remark, which technically in law is known as obiter dicta. This is one thing. Now, in this case, there was that if you look at the facts of the case, I went through this case because I found it very odd, court giving this fatwa that if there is no ICU, you can't operate like this. Many small nursing homes will be out of function. Actually, in that case, the defendant himself said that he could need ICU facility. The patient was having compromised physiology. I undertook the case, right? and then he needed ICU, and then I shifted. In that context only, court said that if you are having this premonition that he could require ICU, then why did you operate? And this is perfectly okay. So you should read the judgment in detail. Like I told you in Pavaskar case also, it became in media, it was circulated widely that prescription giving on phone is culpable negligence. So same thing is happening here. Look at the context, look at the facts of the case, and why the court has drawn that inference. Has court drawn inference into a particular context? Then you cannot divorce the inference from that context and apply it somewhere. And this has been done in this particular judgment. Not that all ICU in every nursing home where surgery is being done, ICU is required. When patients with compromised physiology are done, then ICU is required, and there is nothing wrong in this judgment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vijay. So we have most of the questions being done. Vikram sir, a last comment from you, and then we'll switch off the session.
Yeah. In these days of COVID infection, as Dasgupta sir said, I think it can be a good idea to take a blanket cover consent for COVID infections both ways, either transmitted from us to the patient or from patient to the hospital staff also.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Sir, there is something known as implied consent. I did not talk about it. It also comes under the purview of the implied consent, the way the information is widely available on net and every media. So everybody knows about it. So if one is accepting any therapeutic transaction, then it would be taken as implied consent also.
Right.
Okay. So thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, Pradeep sir, for such a great talk. We had really good attendance and a good discussion after your talk today. So hope we continue with these things in the coming week. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Okay.
Thank you, Pradeep sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.